it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. A few weeks ago, you might remember that I read a story for you called The Job Offer. And this was quite special to me, as it's the first story I'd ever actually written myself. Now, I haven't written part 2, but I'm very glad to say that the story does continue. So here we go with The Job Offer. Blood-soaked liar. I sat and stared at my phone. An old, faded Nokia brick, the boss suggested it, sitting in the middle of my dirty coffee table. It sat still as ever, quiet and unmoving like it had been for the past 3 days. But I knew day 3 always brought new work. Yes, I could have called into work day after day, but I always got a one-off here and there. Mostly 1 day off, rarely 2, but never more than 3 off days in a row, like it was an unofficial policy. And today was day 3 of me sitting on my ass waiting for the inevitable call. My first month of work had been a whirlwind of emotion, mostly excitement, a lot of disgust, and a whole lot of what the fuckery. But I couldn't make up my mind if I hated it or loved it. That in itself should be a red flag for anyone getting to know me. The job was never the same, but it was mostly cleaning up desecrated and ripped up bodies. All mostly human. Mostly. There were some other things mixed in with the gory crime scenes, like limbs, claws, and appendages that would be more at home in the Mariana Trench or a pervy anime. I considered where I'd come from, what I'd been through, and where I was now. Being with killers. Not being a killer, but being with them. It was a groove I always found myself setting smoothly into all my life. Was it a curse, or maybe more like birds of a feather? My waxing poetic about my past was put on hold when the old-school Nokia let out its angry buzz, vibrating across my glass tabletop. I picked it up quick, hearing my boss's dead tone call to me. You see, my boss's voice was always even, but with a hint of cruelty lurking behind his words, or the feeling he was enjoying a secret joke at my expense. So glad to hear you pick up quickly. Shows initiative. I'm confident in saying you've shaken your initial, unsureties. Once again, he was right, and I felt like he was laughing at me for it. I had considered quitting multiple times during the first month. I figured on, giving them a good 3 months, quarter of a year, to make back their investment and time that they'd put into me. And if I was super respectful, my replacement wouldn't be scraping pieces of me into black plastic bags. Yes, a dark thought occurs. Maybe that was my first job, cleaning up the last guy to give 3 months. Hello, is the phone we provided working correctly? Yes, Mr. Elliot, I quickly responded. I'm on board 100%. First I thought I might not be a good fit for the team, but... Good. Mr. Elliot interrupted, rolling over my thoughts and concerns like a man stepping on an ant as he walks towards a goal. Well, no matter. No team today, just you. The request was for the highest discretion, so I needed my quickest and cleanest on the job. I kind of hated that I felt flattered. And no team. Nice. Those assholes were weird. I preferred to work alone and not have to watch my back the whole shift. Once again, Mr. Elliot read my mind and answered my next question preemptively. Triple the rate. 12-hour window. Can be lengthened if necessary. Let me know upon your personal evaluation of the job site. Endorphins dumped into my stream as I considered the high pay and the reason for it. I couldn't help my dark curiosity from getting the better of me. I kind of wanted to see this. I wanted to see the carnage. 15 minutes later, a black Mercedes came to pick me up, and off I went to the mysterious job site. The driver told me a dumpster had been placed on site and would be absconded away when the job was finished. Yes, now I was very interested in what awaited me at the job site. As I sat in the back of the pristine Mercedes, I had no cell phone service and no one to talk to. The driver had retreated back behind his roll-up window. I also realized the windows were tinted black on the inside to keep me from seeing where I was being taken. Well, I guess it was better than a bag thrown over my head by some goon on Mr. Featherstone's payroll. 40 minutes later, the vehicle came to a stop and the automatic doors unlocked. I sat still for a while, waiting on the driver to open the door for me, but no dice. I had to open my own damn door. I stepped out into the crisp evening air. The sun was going down and the soothing sound of wind blowing through the trees surrounded me. I was in some forest clearing by the side of a gravel road. The Mercedes wasted no time in almost hitting me with the side mirror as it backed up and zoomed away. I turned to see what he was so adamant on getting away from. In front of me, 30 meters out, up on a hill, was a giant 3-story mansion dominating the skyline. It towered over the trees that packed tightly against it as it stood elevated up the hill. It was old, but beautiful in a haunted Downton Abbey sort of way. I cursed the asshole driver as I began my hike up the hill. Well, true to their word, my employees had provided a blue metal dumpster outside the building, with a pallet of cleaning product neatly packed together. How did they get all this here so quickly in these deep woods? Oh, did they drop this shit off with a helicopter? I walked up the creaky steps to the front door. I half expected the door to open on its own, like the cliché in every haunted house story. It didn't open on its own, but was already cracked ajar. The door handle smashed inwards, along with bits of the door frame splintered. I exhaled slowly as I pushed the door open with my foot, ready for anything to rush at me from inside the mansion. But halfway open and nothing moved inside the quiet house. I pushed the door a little further to let the surviving sunlight shine into the entryway. The door stuck on something and wouldn't give. I looked down to see my first client, a man crumpled up on the ground, a knife jammed up under his chin. A thick pool of blood saturated this dead man. His eyes rolled back in his head and his brow furrowed in a perpetual scowl. His mouth pinned shut by the knife, but still oozing blood and spit from between closed lips. Of course, the house was dark, and there was no light switch by the door. I could see the warm glow of light in a room to my right, but it wasn't enough to illuminate anything else. I thought of using the flashlight app on my phone, but quickly remembered I didn't have a modern phone. No, I had the prehistoric Nokia. I looked back at the pallet of cleaning supplies and, thank God, there were flashlights and glow sticks. One was a standard heavy-duty mag light, a super bright LED light made to look and carry like an old lantern, and lastly the one with an elastic strap to fit across my head like a coal miner. I set up quickly, head strapped, mop and bag of supplies in one hand and heavy mag light in the other. I appreciated the heaviness of the big light. It could easily be used to crack somebody across the dome in a pinch. I put on a fresh face mask, took a deep breath, and pushed into the dark house. I cracked and dropped a green glow stick by Mr. Knife Gin at the door. And immediately I was thrown off by the layout of the house. The front door opened up to a long hallway that ran straight across the house and into the shadows of the other end of the structure. Doorways lined each side of the hallway, but they were spaced irregularly. 5 doorways on the left and 3 on my right. The first doorway on the right next to me was flush against the wall of the front of the house, and the last 2 were very close together all the way at the other end. The doorways on the left seemed a little better. All 5 were spaced out pretty evenly except for doorway 2 and 3, which were only 6 inches away from each other. And who builds a house like this? Some sort of idiot or artist. That's who I suspected. It was like a child's attempt at a house, or a house from a bad dream. The layout made no sense at all. As any sane person would expect, I expected the number of doorways to annotate the number of rooms running off the main hallway. 5 rooms on the left and 3 on the right, yeah? Well, that turned out to be a lie. There was one main hallway, a giant-ass room on the left, and a giant-ass room on the right. All the doorways led into the same huge rooms on either side. But I'd have to worry about the strange building layout later. Now I had to go body hunting. On my first initial peeks into both rooms, I caught the sights of bodies in both. I took the left room first. The closest two bodies were laying right next to each other. A black male with blood all over his mouth, with multiple gunshots in his chest. His hands were frozen in awkward curled fists, indications of a very painful death. The man next to him was wearing a ski mask and camo. His throat ripped out, blood all over his face and torso that had also pooled under the two of them. A gun in his hand, slide rocked back to show it was empty. It didn't take a genius or a CSI specialist to figure out what had happened. Black dude tackled Camo Man. Camo Man emptied the clip into the black guy's belly before the black guy ripped Camo Guy's throat out with his teeth and rolled off him to die. That's pretty hardcore. Further down the long room was a few chairs randomly placed and an old hairy 70s-looking throw rug smushed up against the wall. I found my next body at the far end. Half of the top of his head missing and propped against the far wall. He was a pale white man with loose-fitting clothes, some sort of petticoat and yellow shorts. A top hat lay, bloody, in his lap. And come to think of it, the dead dude at the door and the black guy also had weird clothes on. Going back to check, I noted that the black man was shirtless, barefoot with blue jeans, a belt around his waist that didn't go through the loops, and a gold watch on either hand. The guy with a knife in his neck was the closest to being normal, except he was wearing heavy winter clothes like a big puffy jacket, a beanie and gloves, with no shirt underneath and unzipped. Was this some crazy cult that had decided to dress like idiots? Why had they been attacked by Camo Dude? Maybe the mystery would be revealed when I explored the right side room. And oh boy, did the right side room have answers, but raised more questions too. There was a dinner table in the middle of the room, bodies all around it. On the table was a woman, red-haired, young. She had bound hands and feet with rope and a knife sticking out of the center of her chest, just like Dexter would do in the TV show. Her eyes opened and her mouth wide in a forever scream. I felt a twinge of sadness for her. I was usually good about keeping my emotions in check around the dead, but this girl felt different from the rest of the jokers laying dead in this house. She seemed like an innocent, like a victim. She was wearing the torn rags of clothes that had been ripped off of her. Her shirt hung stretched and torn around her neck, exposing her stomach and bra. Her pants legs had been ripped long ways to reveal her calves. I leaned in closer, and to my horror, I saw that pieces of her legs had been ripped off, like something was eating her. This was a new sort of messed up for me. These guys were cannibals. Looking at the dead around the table, I counted 2 bodies with weird clothes and blood around their mouths and hands. They'd both been shot with what looked like a shotgun, judging by the pellet spread on both of them. I turned around to find the culprit that had killed them. He was another camo-wearing guy, crumpled by the doorway leading out to the hallway. The shotgun was broken in half, and the guy's left arm was just gone. The wall had been dented inwards from where he'd been thrown into it. His blood splattered all over the doorframe and the ground. I counted 3 ejected shotgun shells near him, but only 2 dead. I'd searched for a third body, but never found one. Neither did I find the missing arm. Oh, no matter. My junior Matlock time was over. Now I had a job to do. There was cleaning to get done. I began the arduous task of cleaning up evidence, wrapping up bodies in tarps and hauling them to the dumpster. I doubled up on masks after mopping, to spray bleach everywhere. It wasn't until I was outside bringing out the last body. It was the redhead. I'd saved her for last and treated her the most gentle as I stacked her on the pile of burrito-wrapped bodies. That's when I looked up and remembered the house was 3 stories. Oh shit, I had 2 other floors to look into. I hadn't seen the stairs or anything in the house to remind me, and I'd been so disturbed by the weirdness of this job that I tunnel-visioned onto my work. How could I forget something so obvious? I was supposed to be good at my job. I turned on my headlamp and maglite and cursed as I stomped back towards the house. I had to make sure if there was a way up to the second and third floor. Hopefully there were no bodies and I could end this job. But little did I know that the upper floors held something I'd never come across in my short career. I found a survivor. Oh God, 2 floors left. How could I forget about them? I mean, I staged all the bodies at the door until I was done cleaning, and then dragged them out into the yard to the dumpster, and it was pitch black outside already. No moon to be seen. I knew I was just making excuses for being distracted and losing my focus. Well, the fact was, I had to clean the whole house. So it's good I caught my F up before I called somebody to come get me. I stomped around the dark building, searching the ceiling for any signs of egress. My head-mounted flashlight, though dimmer than before, was still working. And the many green glow sticks spread about the floor gave off a haunted house or sci-fi vibe. At least the strange layout of the building made it easy to search. Only 2 rooms and a hallway running down the middle. I cleared the left room and the hallway when I finally found what I was looking for. At the very back of the right room was what appeared to be a circular hole, just wide enough for me to squeeze through if I sucked in. But first I had to get up to it. I pulled over the giant table the poor red-haired girl had been killed on and stacked a chair on top of it. Slowly, on shaken footing, I stood atop the chair and ascended towards the hole in the ceiling. I turned my maglite on and laid it by the lip of the hole as my head and torso made it through the opening. My head-mounted light showing me nothing but old boxes and the fog of floating dust. Well, I could pull myself the rest of the way up easily from where I was. I grabbed the ledge of the opening and immediately touched something warm and wet. I looked at my hands to see what I already fully suspected. It was fresh blood, but not a lot of it. I could see the spattering trail of it running around the boxes, some having been knocked over. Well, shit. I hoped whoever the blood belonged to was already dead and not some half-crazed, badly dressed cannibal waiting for me. Brief struggle and I heaved myself from floor 1 to floor 2. I picked up my maglite, holding it cocked back ready to strike, and was glad for my corona mask helping me block out most of the dust. From what I could see, the second floor was just one large room, like a loft. The high ceiling revealed that there was never a third floor to begin with. The boxes were tightly packed together, filled with old clothes and assorted garbage you might find at your local thrift store. The wall at the front of the house had 4 windows. 2 windows 4 feet up and another 2 windows 4 feet above them, giving the impression of 3 floors from the outside of the building. No moonlight in through the windows, though, leaving my visibility low and claustrophobic. It was like the house was built to look normal from the outside, but whoever built it dropped the facade when designing the inside. I slowly followed the blood trail, scooting boxes out of my way as I did. It seemed there was a lot more blood at the beginning of the trail and less as I followed it. My amateur CSI skills had no idea what that meant. I turned a corner and almost jumped out of my skin as my light illuminated a pale face peering at me from behind 2 boxes. Fright gripped my body as I realized whoever I was tracking was alive. My brain finally kicked in and I recognized it was the face of a child, an extremely scared child. Her brown eyes stared at me as I stared right back in silence. Both of us were frozen like deer in headlights, studying each other's expressions. She was young, teenager maybe, with pale skin, freckles like a band-aid across her nose and cheeks, and reddish auburn hair. She reminded me of the dead girl on the table. Hell, she could even have been the dead girl's kid sister. I recognized the look of fear on her face and realized I was the scary one in this situation. This girl was probably hiding from whatever hell happened downstairs, and then my ass comes stomping around in the dark, following her blood trail and shining a blinding light in her eyes. I pulled down my mask and put on the best comforting smile I could muster. I reached up slowly to click off my headlamp and pointed the maglite at the ground between us so she could see my face. Hi, I'm not with them. I pointed down at the ground awkwardly and tried to smile harder. I don't know anything about what happened down there, and I don't care either. I'm just here to clean up the mess and bounce. I'm just looking for bodies, not alive people. She stared at me, unblinking. I'm not going to hurt you, that's what I mean, I spat out, realizing I was doing a terrible job at not sounding creepy. She did blink at this, and I saw her expression soften. But then she winced in pain and stumbled forward, knocking one of the boxes over. Oh, shit, are you okay? I asked, as I finally caught a good look at her, without the boxes blocking her. I saw her holding a towel tightly to her side, soaking up dark blood. Oh, she's not okay. Shit, what should I do? Do I help her? Do I call the boss? I mean, I don't deal with a living, but shit, she's just a kid. Can't let her bleed out. What if I call this in and they want me to snuff her? Or send some goon to come do it instead of me? Don't want to be responsible for killing a kid, but if I do nothing, she'll probably die of blood loss. How much blood do you need to lose before you pass out? Well, my mind raced through millions of inner thoughts and dialogue. My brain was shooting questions and scenarios back and forth to itself like a lively debate. I'm not good with people or situations like this. It's why I prefer the dead. I decided to start small. How'd you get here? I asked. I lowered myself down to one knee to appear less threatening like the cops always do with kids on TV. With my sister, she said slowly in an accent I'd never heard before. Maybe English wasn't her first language. A sudden realization hit me, and I felt sadness like I'd never felt before on a job. It was her sister that was tied, stabbed, and chewed on downstairs. All the bodies I would come across never felt this personal. I could always disconnect from what had happened to them. This was the first time it had a personal context to a victim. Were you taken here by the bad people downstairs? I asked. No, she said, nodding her head up and down, sending me some mixed signals. Maybe it was from the shock or just different customs from wherever she was from. No, the men came and killed my friends. Sister pushed me up here to hide. Is she still down there? Yes, no, I stuttered, thoroughly confused by what she'd told me. Was this girl friends with the really badly dressed cannibals? Or were the camo guys the actual cannibals? So the camo guys busted into this house and killed everybody and ate on the legs of her sister? Yeah, but the camo guys didn't have blood around their mouths. Maybe they were bloody under the masks. The forensics told a very different story, but like I've said, I'm no expert. The girl winced in pain and swayed like she was about to pass out. She gripped the bundled clothes tighter to her side, blood running down her pants now. How bad are you hurt? I asked with genuine concern. One of the men fired a gun that shot little bullets everywhere. Some of the tiny bullets hit my side before I got up here. It's not bad though. I think it's getting better. Getting better? I scoffed. You don't just get better from gunshot wounds. Please let me see your injury. I swear I'm not here to hurt you. The girl scowled at me and ducked down defensively as I reached out. I knew I'd overstepped my bounds and felt like she would snap off one of my fingers like a stray dog if I pushed further. I then jumped out of my skin at the sound of a tremendous bang from downstairs, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Cleaner, are you in here? Came a man's bellowing voice. The girl ran back behind another set of stacked boxes. Don't let him get me, she whispered harshly. He was one of the men who hurt me. Whoa, I said, patting the air. My job is to clean, not to be a narc. I could see she didn't get what I was saying, so I reiterated. I won't tell him shit. She smiled slightly at this, but it whipped off her face when another angry yell from downstairs echoed up to us. If you're in here, show yourself. I might have to burn this damn house down. I wouldn't want to kill one of Mr. Elliott's employees. Okay, I'm coming down now, I yelled back. Before I turned back towards the hole, I thought of something. I spun back to face the girl and rolled the mag light to her. That's company property, so I'll need it back, I joked with what I hoped was a calming demeanor. When I was standing over the hole, I could see the moving shadow of someone pacing back and forth, waiting on me in the glow of green light. I lowered myself back down to the unsteady chair on the table, and then down to solid ground. My name is Sir Thaddeus Freeman, said a broad-shouldered man carrying a long silver knife in his left hand. He had a meticulously groomed salt and pepper goatee, balding with silver hair around his ears. His face was withered and wrinkled like old leather, but his eyes held an ice-blue clarity. I'm afraid that I have called upon your services too soon, he continued. It was the fault of one of my protégés. It's not common for us hunters to leave a job unfinished. So he's the client. This Sean Connery-looking dude called me in to clean up his mess. As I stared at him, I noticed his strange attire. Black vest over a white-collared shirt, baggy black BDU pants with a big revolver on his left hip. I realized that his black vest was wet, with red blood staining his white undershirt. Good to meet you, Mr. Freeman. Sir Freeman, he corrected sharply. My apologies, Sir Freeman. I usually never meet the clients of the job. Is there anything I can help you with? I bullshitted, hoping my forced politeness was convincing. Yes, I do, he interjected sternly. Have you seen anyone else around the property? A young girl, perhaps? Yeah, I have, I responded cheerfully. I turned to point at the table. Yeah, there was a dead red-haired girl on the table when I arrived. She's on top of the pile if you... No, a living girl. She'll be very similar in appearance to the poor lass on the table. This she-beast is a smart one. She takes the appearance close to what the intended prey looks like, he said. Then he looked down and began talking in a way that sounded like he was mostly talking to himself. She must be old enough to discern how humans think on a basic level. She's picked up on little things, like looking similar to the targeted human, or so the monster can get close, so the human lets their guard down. Well, all I've seen are the recently deceased that were spread all over the building, I said. Sir Freeman looked back at me with a doubting expression, so I tried to change the subject. You're bleeding. I pointed at his blood-stained shirt and vest. Do you need help? I think I have bandages outside with the supplies. Look here, boy, the man said, stepping forward with a wince of pain and sticking his finger hard into my chest. This thing is not human. The bitch is a liar. Her and her pack have been killing unsuspecting humans like that poor young redhead for centuries. They stalk and study their prey for months. They take the form of a human for one night a year to feed on man's flesh and lengthen their horrid lifespans. I stepped back from the man's angry tirade when spittle from his mouth sprinkled my face mask. I don't believe it was on purpose, so I didn't deck the old-timer immediately, but I sure as hell wasn't going to remain in spitting distance of him. Besides, he had a knife, a gun, and he was a client. Okay, I understand, I said, patting the air in a calming gesture for a second time during the night. I'll keep an eye out, but I'm almost through here anyway, Sir Freeman. Don't lie to me, boy. I tell you monsters exist, and you blew it off like I'm some crazy old-timer. You don't even believe me, do you? He finished, his sharp blue eyes cutting into me. I've seen some weird stuff since starting this job, so maybe monsters are real. What matters is you believe it's real and you're the paying client, I responded, feeling good about fooling the crazy old-timer. Of course he was crazy. Worst part about this old man's story was he wasn't even getting his monsters right. I guess he was trying to describe werewolves, but werewolves turn into wolves on full moons, not from monsters into humans. And there was no moon outside tonight anyways. I didn't know what was going on, but I'd done my good Christian deed already. I gave the kid upstairs a flashlight and lied for her. Now I needed to get the hell away from this guy. They have to eat on this night or they die. Their life force leaves them, Sir Freeman told me with bug eyes. My hunters and I stopped them before they could consume the girl, and you placed all the bodies outside, but she's still around, and daybreak is within an hour. She will be coming back. Unfortunately, I have another job to get to, so... I lied politely as I backed away from him. I'll give you $500 to wait with me for another hour. You just have to watch the bodies until they're picked up. I'll lay in wait inside if she shows herself. Will you take this deal? Yes, Sir Freeman. I can push back my other job a little, I quickly answered. This guy was obviously crazy, but I'm not crazy enough to turn down that type of cash. Good. Just stay out front. You might see Squire Jacob traipsing around in the woods. Don't mind him. Squire? What the hell? These guys are cosplaying King Arthur in the supernatural. I was about to turn around and head outside when he asked one more question. Did you check the top floors completely? Yes, I said, turning back to face him with my fake pleasant voice. There's only one more floor, actually. This house has some crazy architecture. I watched the man turn and limp towards the table, looking up at the hole in the ceiling. It's a farce, just like them. He turned his head to eyeball me, just like the creatures themselves. Normal looking on the outside, but corrupted and hollow on the inside. They lured that poor girl in here. If only we weren't too late to save her. Okay, well, I'm going to stand outside now, I said as I once again tried to break away from the conversation. Wait, the old man said alarmingly. He jumped up on the table with uncanny dexterity and reached up to touch the edge of the hole. Fresh blood, he stated as he dipped his fingers in the blood from the girl upstairs. Oh, that. I scrambled in my brain for something. I looked down at the girl's fresh blood on my hands. Yeah, I cut my hand on something while climbing, I finished, feeling proud of myself as I quickly flashed the palm of my hand to the man. Well, that was a mistake. The squirrely old goat must have eyes like a hawk because he immediately jumped down from the table and rushed me. He snatched my hand and flipped my palm around to inspect. Bullshit, he growled. No cut. Not your blood. Sir... The old-timer interrupted by delivering a devastating punch to my stomach, knocking the wind out of me and collapsing me to the ground. He then turned to race up the table and chair, silver knife in one hand, gun in the other. He disappeared up through the hole as I sucked in air and tried to stand. I could hear his thundering footsteps as the ceiling cracked and bulged above me. There you are, you she-bitch, I heard him yell, followed by one loud gunshot, the girl's screams, and there was stomping about like a fight was happening. She continued to scream as the tumultuous footsteps travelled around above me. But then he began to scream, and I heard the distinct sound of metal hitting something hard. The floor busted out above me, and 2 legs fell through. I rolled out of the way as the immense sound of further cracking followed. No, you're not getting away again, Sir Freeman screamed right before the bottom fell out on the second floor, and 2 figures fell together to glide into the ground in a cloud of dust and wood fragments. I could barely tell what was happening, with only the green glow of the sticks illuminating all the upturned dust. The dust started to clear. I could see Sir Freeman on his back with the poor girl in a bear hug. She screamed in pain and scratched at his face weakly. She turned her head to spot me, her eyes wide and mouth open in a desperate plea. Help! Help! Sir Freeman grunted and hugged her tighter, causing her to let out her air in a disgusting croak. He rolled them over so he ended up on top of her, pinning her to the ground with his hand around her neck. I should have known a gunshot wouldn't take you down. I have to use silver on the alpha, he yelled into her face as he put the tip of the silver knife right to her solar plex. Just like the other redhead had been killed, just like her sister. That's all the evidence I needed to keep a crazy old man from gutting a defenseless girl in front of me. I ran up behind him and snatched his revolver from its loose-fitting holster and jammed the barrel end into the nape of his neck. Get off the girl, psycho! I demanded, my voice shaking with fear and rage. Oh, stupid boy, she isn't human. She's almost out of time before she changes back. I have to kill her while she's in this weakened state, Sir Freeman yelled back at me without turning. I'd figured he was going to argue with me or test my mettle, so I whacked him pretty good across the side of his head with the long barrel of the gun. To the old bastard's credit, he barely flinched as blood began pouring down his face. I bet no one else knows you're here, right? I'll just wrap you up with the rest of your sicko dead friends outside, I screamed, hoping he'd take the bluff. I didn't know if I could kill a dude execution style. Okay, Sir Freeman said. He slowly moved the knife away from the girl's belly and held it out to the side, placing it on the ground out of the girl's reach. He shifted his weight to pin the girl down by straddling her and held both hands up. God, he was making me sick. You're a businessman, right? He said in a much calmer tone. I know this is a lot to take in, but in a short while the creatures' bodies outside will revert to their animal form, and I will be justified. But I have to kill her before she returns to normal. I'll pay you an additional $20,000 to stand down. I swear I'm the good guy here. Before I could reject his offer, the girl lunged up swiftly to chomp her teeth right on his nose. And of course he screamed and pushed her back down with all his force. He pulled away from her and held the place where his nose used to be. I jumped back, screaming along with this noseless man, but without a wasted moment the girl reached out for the knife on the floor beside her. He was distracted enough for her to pull away and snatch the knife, quickly whipping it back between them and thrusting the entire blade up into Sir Freeman's throat and up into his skull. A fountain of blood erupted out of the stab wound when she pulled the blade out. Sir Freeman's hands dropped and he began to topple, but the girl had scrambled out from under him and caught him. She opened her mouth and put it to the bloody geyser of the wound. She hugged him tight as she sucked on the blood like a greedy leech. What the fuck? I stammered as I backed away from this horrible scene. The girl was now hungrily biting off chunks of flesh from the dead man's neck, swallowing and eating, swallowing and eating. At first, I thought it was my inner monologue screaming in my head when I heard the voice behind me. Oh God, no. It can't be. Sir Freeman! I turned to see some white guy with a high and tight haircut, wearing all camo and black face paint under his eyes. He charged at me. I realized this must be the squire Sir Freeman had mentioned earlier. I also realized, too late, that I appeared rather sus spinning around with a gun in my hand. The squire leveled a yellow gun at me, and with a pop, I felt the power of a city's electrical grid flow through me. All my muscles tensed up, and I toppled over to smack my head on the ground. The arsehole that had tasered me discarded the weapon and ran past me. It felt like an eternity, but the taser ran its cycle and finally released me from its hellish grasp. I shakily pulled the probes out of my chest and rolled over to see what was happening. The girl must have retreated into the hallway through one of the awkwardly placed doors because Squire Boy was bending down over his dead companion. I'll finish it, Master. I'll finish the hunt, he said melodramatically before darting off into the hallway, the silver knife in his hand. I lay there, wondering what I should do. I thought of bouncing while the guy was distracted. I didn't have to defend the tiny cannibal girl any longer. She could handle herself. But would I get fired for not cleaning up the extra dead body? Was it like abandoning a job site? I was actually more afraid of getting on Mr. Elliot's bad side. A shriek, similar to a woman but incredibly primal and loud, pierced through the house. I heard the man scream in panic. Oh God, no. I had more time. Squire came running back into the room and looked at me, terrified. His right hand was torn to ribbons and bleeding. The silver knife was nowhere to be seen. He was jumping up and down like a scared kid as he pointed at the gun in my hand. Oh, you have to help me. Shoot it or it will kill both of us. A giant ball of fur and muscle flew into the room and smashed into the man. It was a freaking cat, a big one with pointed ears and a long tan body. It was a mountain lion. The beast's mouth engulfed the man's face and bit down, shaking him about like a chew toy as the giant animal stood over him. I watched the screaming man be shook violently, blood running from his face to be smeared like a paintbrush on the ground, until his neck cracked and he whimpered to silence. I thought about how this was a very ineffective way to kill someone. It's almost like the big cat chose to cause as much pain as possible before the man died. When it finally turned its giant bloody face to look at me, I realized how stupid I'd been for not running. I was too entranced or in shock with the brutality in front of me, and now I had no chance of outrunning this thing. It began stalking towards me on its padded feet. I wasn't going to go down without a fight, so I scrambled to my feet and raised my gun. Oh, the damn cat was so fast, clearing the gap between us in a microsecond and slapping the gun out of my hand to sling it against the wall. I cried out and half expected to see my hand in tatters, like the squire's had been, but it was still intact, just throbbing from the force of the hit. The beast, now only a foot from me, let out a low growl and sat on its hind legs. He got up, let out that awful woman-like scream, and sat down again quickly, only to do the stand-up, sit-down motion again. Oh, I'm not stupid. I promptly sat down on my ass, now face level with the killer animal. Its feline eyes studied me, and its hot rancid breath invaded my nostrils through my mask. The cat, satisfied somehow, turned away from me and looked up into the big hole that had just been created in the ceiling. With feline grace, it launched itself up silently into the darkness of the second floor. I waited, wondering if I should try to run now. That thing was so fast, though. Was it just playing with me like a house cat plays with a caught mouse? After a few moments, the cat returned, plopping down gracefully in front of me, a black maglite in its bloody mouth. Oh, no way, I said with incredulity, as the beast walked up to me and dropped the light. It stared at me a moment longer before promptly turning around to sprint out of the room in a flash. I heard the front door get bashed open as it left the house. Well, I just sat there, dumbstruck. After a good 10 minutes of sitting and digesting what had happened, I was fairly confident the little girl monster wasn't coming back for me. I walked out the front door into the bright rays of a dawning sun to burn my sensitive eyes. I took the phone out of my pocket and speed dialed number 1. Mr. Elliot answered after 2 rings. "Is it done?" The boss's voice cut right to the chase. "You were supposed to call me when you arrived." Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Elliot. It won't happen again. It's been a hell of a night. Unforeseen variables got in the way of me finishing on schedule," I explained. There was a pause on the other end before the boss answered. "Do you need more time?" was all he asked. Yes, Mr. Elliot. And maybe one more thing." What's that?" "We need to discuss hazard pay." So I have to say I was really pleased with how my first ever piece of writing turned out, but at the same time I had no ambition whatsoever to keep it going and turn it into a series. It had done everything I wanted it to do. But having said that, I'm delighted again that it's keeping going. And my heartfelt thanks to Caleb Slager for writing a part 2 for this and really sort of keeping it in the spirit of what I intended these characters to be like. And hopefully a lot more to come. What do you think? Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say? In the comment section below the video, and as ever, I'll do my best to reply to as many as I can. So, back again tomorrow night. Now, I said I had a 3-hour story for you, but basically it's going to be split into 3 parts. So it's going to be an hour on Wednesday, on Thursday and Friday. 3 consecutive nights with 1-hour story, all culminating on Friday evening. If you like the sound of that, then good. Well, enough for one evening, but coming back tomorrow, eh? Till the next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or 2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.